We will get things started this evening with Mr. Brooks and our correspondence and communication.
Good evening. As we have our last meeting of the summer and kind of our first meeting of the school year, it feels like. We're fully prepared and ready for the children, so we're pretty excited about that. Correspondence and communications. We had one letter that came in that was shared with the Board of Education from someone seeking the position of the Area 9 Director for NYSBA, and that action item is on the agenda for tonight for the board to consider. We also have another item that came in that came in after we produced the agenda, so I just want to share this with the board. It's actually pretty exciting. We got this from the New York State School Boards Association a few months ago, certainly at a board member's urging. Ms. Joanne Reed urged us, and always urges us, to be involved with NYSBA and participate in their programs. And we applied for a grant. We applied for an award, actually. And the award that we applied for was the 2017 Be Change for Kids Innovation Award. And Ms. Heck put the application in along with Ms. Clinton, our middle school principal, for our 6th grade STEAM program. And I received a call last week, and we received the official letter this week that we got the award. So in New York State, there are a number of applicants that apply for this, and NYSBA awards an elementary program, a middle school program, and a high school level program. And our middle school program is the state-recognized New York State School Boards Association Middle School Be the Change for Kids Innovation Award School. So fantastic. Robin, thank you very much for the application. Joanne, thank you very much for urging us to do this, but we got the award. So I really, if I could, yes, absolutely. I want to read just a piece of this. It's been an exhilarating experience seeing New York public schools driving creativity and innovation in education. The judges were quite impressed with your program. To quote, "We applaud the program's goal to expose connections between engineering and the arts, mathematics, literacy, and science. The judges were also impressed with the wide range of workshops offered to your students." So in getting the award, not only are we recognized by NYSBA, there is a ceremony that will be coming up in the latter part of September, so I'll get that information out. We certainly would like to put together a trip to bring some people up there, certainly some staff, perhaps some students, and a board member or two would be lovely to bring. It is also accompanied with a $5,000 award, so we really are very excited about what happened here. So kudos to all that participated in making this happen, but more importantly, what a great experience for our kids. Obviously recognized at the state level for something fantastic going on here in Marlborough. So, Ms. Reed, thank you very much, and Ms. Heck, thank you very much.
You're very awesome.
So that's all we have for correspondence.
Okay. We also got a couple of letters from interested student reps that we'll talk about in executive session.
Correct, and
okay.
actually it's on my report to kind
okay.
of get into how we're going to select that.
Okay, so then perfect segue into
My
reports.
Great. Board of Education committees, we have 2 standing committees right now that are working actively and will begin to work more actively as we open the school year. The policy committee did some work over the summer, but certainly will be finalizing the work of completing our policy review beginning very soon with policy section 6000. It's a couple of individual policies that are being read tonight that kind of finishes off our sections from last year and cleans things up, so we made a lot of progress there. And the 17-18 school year, the facilities committee is going to be pretty busy with looking at our building condition survey and developing plans on how we can address issues that are in the facility, in the building condition survey, and they'll be working very closely with Mr. Witherow on that. We are continuing to be somewhat frustrated with the Smarter Schools Technology Bond. As you know, we've had that application in for a long time. We have been in the final review phase now for about 3 or 4 months. We have reason to believe that we could get approval at any time. It's a fine detailed approval that we're not involved with at this point. They have everything that they need. The program that we want to do is completely approved as far as the scope of what we want to do. Now it's under a financial review, and we're hoping that that's going to be clicked with a green light at some point in the very near future, so we can get ourselves moving on that very exciting initiative for us in the technology world. Mr. Witherall was also heading up with Mr. Callow, our food service director, a food service committee. So maybe, Pat, if you could just give a little brief as to where that food service, where the food committee is, and some progress that you made over the summer.
Sure. We developed the committee. We had our first meeting last Thursday, I believe the 17th. We had a number of community members on the committee, some people from Marist College who were involved with the food service program up there, former board member, Mr. Jennison, who's also the husband of our new head cook, was present, plus community members and a student rep from the high school. And we had some discussion on adding possibly student representatives from the middle school and maybe the elementary school. But overall, it was a good first meeting. We've set meetings for the year. We gave some information out, and it was interesting because I don't think the general public really understands the constraints that the food service program operates under in terms of the nutritional requirements. Even the people from Marist had talked at one point. They said, well, you know what's great is, you know, soups are really good. It's a good way to give a hot meal. And the concern is the sodium content in the soup, where they're not covered by the restrictions that we're covered by. We actually had a comment from one of the community members who said she found it really, really interesting because she wasn't aware of all of the actual constraints. But we've got a lot of good ideas on how to improve the offerings and to get student participation and greater awareness of the food service program in general. I will be giving the superintendent a brief that will include it with you in a board update at some point in the near future. But you know, we had some discussion on, do you focus on, you know, how do you reduce the amount of waste going into the system and by making more appealing offerings to the students. So overall, I think everybody came out of the first meeting with a really good positive attitude that we're going to be able to make some good changes going forward.
Thank you very much. Sure. Additionally, this summer, we've been working, and really it heated up in the last week or so, setting up the new platform that the Board of Education will use for managing meetings called Board Docs. So the Board Docs people were up with our people this week doing some of the fine-tune setting up and then training on it. So our intention is to begin rolling that out to ourselves administratively and practice on it probably for the meeting of the 7th, with the potential front view for the public and the Board of Education either on the 7th or on the 28th. We have to work out some of the little kinks to make sure that we're able to operate a functional meeting as well. So, but once it's all fully set up, this is going to be such a great platform to be able to, for sharing information, not only with our Board of Education, but certainly with our public. Just to give you a quick sense of it, each agenda item will be an agenda item just as you would see it now, and then online, if you click on it, all the associated documents for that particular item are right there with the agenda item. So it's a nice tool to be able to not only easily get to the information we need, but then certainly to be able to share it with our public as well, and a permanent archive of things. So we're very excited about getting that set up and running, and then also we have to make some decisions here as a group. How do we want to use that during meetings? There's certainly the electronic element to it, so we're going to have devices in front of everyone. You're going to bring your own, we're going to supply them, are they going to be all set up ahead of time? So those are some questions that we have to kind of work through. And we can also have a dashboard set up so that the live meeting is running on the screen while we're going through taking action, and we're voting on our devices as well. So it's a very robust system that we have to work through ourselves as far as how do we want to make that work for us as a group. So that would be certainly part of our organizational discussion as we move into the coming meetings.
Does it file things more user-friendly? So we'll be able to, you know, just hypothetically be able to just go if we have something that we're, oh yeah, I remember, but I don't remember what meeting it was. We will file it accordingly.
It's a searchable database, so...
So just keywords.
Correct. And you can search your own stuff. You can limit your search to your own stuff, or you can search out any other of the users that are participating with the Board Doc system. That's part of the training that we'll do with the group on how we search that, use it as a tool. So, yes.
So Mike, does that, well, you made it sound that actually the community can be able to look at the files associated with the agenda as well, or you were just
Correct.
referring to board members? Really?
That's correct. The documents that are public documents, virtually everything that's in EDOC is a foilable public document. It's just that the public doesn't have access to EDOC. Board doc is fully public-facing, so the documents that are public documents will be front-facing, and the public will be able to view, access, download, print, whatever they want to do with those. Yep. We also did receive back in the late spring, early summer, 2 applications for student Board of Education reps, and the Board of Education just needs to give me direction on how you want to make that selection. The 2 applicants are in front of you in my update, and perhaps we can have some dialogue on how we're going to decide which of those 2, and I can certainly give some advice and direction if the board asks me. Finally, a disappointing piece. Boys and girls JV soccer will not be running this year. We only have 20 students for boys and 21 students for girls for JV and varsity. So they're only going to be running a varsity program. There actually are at least 2 other schools in our section that are experiencing the same problem. So unfortunately, there's no way we can field 4 teams with 41 kids. There's just no way, 20 and 21 kids. So.
You combine them?
Well, I think that one of the things that our athletic director is gaining in her dialogue with some of them is that the private programs, the travel programs are kind of keeping kids within their program instead of allowing them or suggesting that they move on to school ball. So that does certainly pull some kids away from your program.
Has another sport increased in participation?
I didn't look at that, but when I asked, why she thinks
Yeah,
that is, she said
that's
she
that.
really thinks that the private programs, the travel teams, are kind of gobbling up some kids. And that's all I have.
Okay. Any news from Orange County School Boards? Mrs. Reed?
We did have a meeting, and we will start off again this year, September 6th, with Mid-Hudson School Council will be there, and they've invited everybody. Everyone got an invitation to talk about the status and the studies of the testing of K through 12 survey. Going also to convention up at Lake Placid, and also for Area 9 was John Redmond from the Florida School Board. And that's who I do know, and I do believe that, I would like to sponsor him for our vote. And basically, everybody's there to come and join us, and hopefully, we'll see you there.
So you're saying opposed to the letter that we received
Karen?
from Karen?
Yeah, I know John, he's been with Orange Ulster School Boards for a while. He's a good candidate, and I believe, we had talked at the last meeting about John from Florida, and we were going to give him our support. So, there's also a letter that we got from Orange Ulster School Board about the agenda for September 6th. So it's also on here too, or it should have been on here. Because I'm looking at the other one. John, yeah, there it is. The Area 9 with Doris leaving. So, and that's basically my report.
Okay, Mr. Milazzo, any news from Ulster County?
There wasn't a meeting over the summer? Teresa, you haven't seen anything from them yet with the schedule, have you? No. Yeah, we haven't even gotten the schedule yet for their fall meetings to start. It's only usually every couple months, so, but nothing at this time.
Okay. Thank you. Moving on to public comment on agenda items. Okay.
No Ralph, no Mark. We got nobody to...
All right. Then we will move on to number 6 of the agenda, resignation of board member. Resolved that the Board of Education, upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, accept the official resignation letter from the Board of Education member, Mr. William Bill Bell, effective August 31st, 2017. Can I get a motion to accept Mr. Bell's resignation? Joanne? Russell? Any discussion?
If we vote no, does that mean he has to come back?
I just have a brief letter that Bill asked me to read to the community and everybody else. So I'm just going to read right from it because it's easy. I'm not a memorizer. All right. To the students, staff, and residents of the Marlborough Central School District. Over the past several months, many of you have likely heard about the decision my wife and I made to relocate our family to Central Florida. Those of you that know me best have likely been a part of conversations in which I've shared my interest in eventually landing in Florida. Although never did I think it would happen before retirement, I'm a firm believer that in order to experience the gifts life has to offer, you have to muster the courage to grab the reins of opportunity whenever they present themselves. I can only hope those of you who share my sentiments can overcome the same fears we faced as we embarked on this journey. I want each of you to know that serving this community as a school board trustee has been one of the most rewarding experiences of my life. The stewardship of our district resources and the establishment of sound educational and fiscal policies is critical to the future success of our children. I can only hope that others will take up the challenge with the same passion and enthusiasm that this group does. I wish you all the best and look forward to reading about your forward strides. Thank you again for allowing me the privilege of serving you. Sincerely, Bill Bell.
Thank you. I too would like to say that Bill is definitely a true asset to this board. He's without a doubt a man of integrity who had the courage to stand up for this community when the community called for action. So his presence will definitely be missed. All in favor of those to accept Bill's resignation?
Aye.
All in favor?
Yes.
Any opposed? The motion is carried. Moving on to number 7, resolve that the Board of Education, upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, acknowledge the receipt of the following reports and minutes for June, July 2017 as presented. Can I get a motion to accept? Frank? Joanne, second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? The motion is carried. Number 8, personnel recommendations. Resolve that the Board of Education, upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, approve the personnel recommendations as presented. Can I get a motion to approve the personnel recommendations?
Susan, before you go there, I'd like to make a motion. You have to get a motion first. Oh, I'm sorry. Still waiting for.
Would you like to make a motion?
Go ahead, sorry.
Don't we want to modify both of them before we...
You have to have a motion on the table to modify.
Okay.
That's what I was about to go do.
I'll second. To modify it.
Yeah.
So we're going to make a motion to modify the personnel recommendations.
Yes.
Okay. Can I get a second? Joanne?
I also have,
Discussion.
no offense to anyone, but I still feel that with the social worker, we
You
really should,
would just want to...
I want to take that and vote
Separately.
separately for that, if you don't mind.
Okay, so we have 2 modifications on the table?
No. We have the idea of modifications. We don't know
Yes.
what the modifications are yet.
Right. So,
So
John.
I would like to separate out Jennifer Case because she's a personal friend of myself and my family, and I want to have the ability to vote separately on that. Or actually, I have intention to abstain.
Okay, so we have a motion to separate, I'm sorry, Jennifer Case
And Brian DiStefano into individual votes.
and Brian DiStefano into individual votes. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the motion to separate the two personnel action items from the original has been carried. Can I get a motion to approve as amended? Joanne, second. Frank. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Right. So, resolve that the Board of Education, upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, approve the personnel recommendation for Jennifer Case as presented. Can I get a motion and a second? All in favor?
Wait, you gotta tell, otherwise
sorry.
Teresa can't know.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
You gotta tell her who's the first and second.
Jennifer
Okay,
Case.
Jennifer Case.
Individual motion for Jennifer Case.
And the second?
No, no,
That's a separate act.
Yes. I
I'm,
know.
I'm,
Go ahead.
and
Oh,
Joanne's the
sorry,
second.
the motion, sorry, I apologize.
No, it's good. And then allow discussion.
Okay, any discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay,
Abstention. Abstentions.
oh yes, abstention.
Yes.
And you have that John is an abstention.
Got that, Teresa?
Okay. All right, so moving on, resolved that the Board of Education, upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, approve Brian DiStefano as social worker for, as recommended. Can I get a motion?
Motion.
John, Frank, any discussion?
Yes, I still feel, no offense to the person or whatever, but I think that we need to really restructure, relook at what we're doing, and maybe restructure our social workers, school psychologists, and really look at that picture. So that's my take, and that's what I've been saying for a while. So.
Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Me?
Joanne?
Yep.
Have that, Teresa?
Thank you.
She opposed.
Right, she's a no, but are there any abstentions?
Oh, I'm sorry. Are there any abstentions? No. All right, that one was just a little tricky. But we still have one portion of it left. Resolved that the Board of Education, upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, approve the remainder of the personnel. We did that already? No, we didn't.
That was the first one we did.
That was the first one.
No, we stopped.
No, you
You're
did.
positive.
Positive.
All right, I'm just glad that one's over.
But could I introduce some people?
Yeah, yes, congratulations.
First of all, congratulations to our president for getting through probably one of the more tricky elements, because making a change to the personnel grid is difficult, and then we did it twice, so well done. I would like to introduce three people that are here tonight that just got appointed to positions, very important for us. Actually completed day 2 of new teacher orientation today as well, so we're a pretty charged up group there today. I was very impressed with the whole group, hope the bus ride was good too. we have Nisa Erickson. Nisa is going to be coming to us as a Spanish teacher. She has a Bachelor's of Arts from Lehman College in Spanish. She has a Master's in Spanish Literature from Lehman College as well, and she is certified in Spanish 7 through 12. Comes to us with tremendous experience. Nisa, we're very excited to have you. Welcome. And you have a cheering section too. So. Awesome. We're also bringing today Brian DiStefano, who is a school social worker. He has a BA in Communications from Iona College, and he has a Master's in Social Work from Adelphi, coming to Marlborough Elementary School as a social worker. Brian, welcome. And Deborah Marone, certainly not new to us. We've had you for some leave replacement for us, but we're back again. You have your certification in Childhood Education 1.6 and Early Childhood Ed, birth to 2. You got your undergraduate degree from SUNY New Paltz in Childhood Education English. Welcome. And congratulations, welcome. We'll see you in a week and a half, opening day. Kids are coming. Very exciting.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, moving on to number 9. Resolve that the Board of Education, upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, authorize the receipt of the CSE, CPSE recommendation of meetings as presented. Can I get a motion to authorize the receipt? Joanne? Russell, second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion is carried. Number 10, policy reading. Resolve that the Board of Education, upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, approve the following board policies as presented. Can I get a motion to approve the policies? Frank? Joanne, second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion is carried. Number 11, budget transfers. Resolve that the Board of Education, upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, authorize the following transfers from the 2016-2017 through 18 school years as presented. Can I get a motion to authorize budget transfers? Frank and Russell, second. Any discussion?
I have a couple of questions. Because they are such large amounts. They keep saying contractual and everything. Patrick, what are they for? Because we've already had a contract in that. I'm kind of like,
sorry.
it's 287, you know, where are we putting the money to and from? And
Sure, so this is,
a lot of these are contractual and non-contractual and non-instructional, and they're large amounts. I mean, shouldn't they have been already put in the budget that
No,
we
we
budgeted
don't-
for last year?
we don't budget them there. We move them over at the end of the year when we can allocate expenses against the transportation piece because we're aided more heavily in those areas. So certain aspects such as, you know, the secretaries in the buildings do a certain amount of work related to transportation. So we can't estimate that in the beginning of the year, but we can recode that at the end of the year. You see this every year at this time. We make these changes from these codes. The 5510 code is a transportation code. So in order to maximize state aid, we put certain expenditures that we can charge against those codes into those codes. So when we do the ST3, we're able to generate aid.
And the non-instructional, and the same thing with the gas.
Again, those are all, when you look at the 160 code, so you know, when you look at the non-instructional services, those would be building support personnel such as secretaries, clerical personnel who do work on the transportation side, and we reallocate part of their expenses into the transportation code.
That's a lot of money to be put
Yeah,
back
you
into
should want us,
transportation.
you should want us to put as much as we can in there because that's going to generate aid for us.
And you're not putting it, it's coming out of those areas and going to here so that we can be charged against transportation, we get higher aid percentage.
Yeah, the higher that number, the more happier everybody should be, because that's going to generate.
And the same thing,
It's not changing the budget, it's just shifting the lines where the money exists.
Right, so when we do the final expenditure, our ST3 that we report to the state, which is what they use to generate the aid in the various categories, as an expense-based aid, the higher our expense in the transportation area, the greater the amount of aid we'll receive.
so my other question is electricity, because you have it down in natural gas, because we did go to natural gas, correct?
Well, that's for the current school year, so when we looked at how we finished out last school year, we're making an adjustment now so that we don't have to do a series of smaller budget transfers throughout the year. And we made note so that when we budget next year, we'll adjust the amounts in natural gas and electricity so that they more accurately reflect our expected expenditures. And the school lunch fund, that's essentially the operating loss for the 16-17 school year, the $45,000. And just for some historical perspective, in the 14-15 school year, we transferred $113,000, which was the operating loss. In the 15-16 school year, we transferred $100,000, which was the operating loss. So in 16-17, we're down to $45,000. So there's been a significant effort made to control cost, which is resulting in a more profitable or a less unprofitable school lunch program.
Hey, Patrick, I have two
Thank you.
questions. One you good? In these allocations, are they aligned with the actual expenses? Or are you just trying to allocate looking forward into the next school year?
Well, when you look, everything that's listed that references the 16-17 on the furthest right column are adjustments for actual expenses in the last year. And the only thing that is prospective for the 17-18 school year is the electricity and natural gas transfer.
Okay. And the second question is, when you said before earlier that we were going to do some kind of a report on the Food Services Committee, will that include some of the details around the expenditures and how you wind up with a negative?
And we certainly couldn't.
Yeah, I'd like to do that because that's obviously a lot to understand there, and being new, I want to see how that all works.
Sure.
Thanks.
Plus, we get the monthly, in the monthly report that we'll start getting next month. It'll show you the actual breakdown month by month of all those expenses.
Right, so I think what we'll do is we'll allow that report to come out, and then if there's further detail and the board chooses to have more information or maybe a report, one of the elements we have to talk about tonight is themes for each of the meetings, and certainly we could do a presentation on any one particular area or any number of particular areas that the board wants a report on. That could be one of them.
Okay.
So,
Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Moving on to agreements. Resolved that the Board of Education, upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, approves and authorizes the superintendent to sign the following agreements as presented. Can I get a motion to approve and authorize these agreements? Frank? Can I get a second?
I'll second.
John, second.
Sorry.
Any discussion? I have a few questions. If you can just bear with me, I have a lot of notes. Just have to read through them. In regards to CBIZ, I think it was in the eDocs, if I'm not mistaken. Or maybe that was the Omni Group. There was one where if we were utilizing the services, we had to initial. You know, it had to be like checked in a box per se. So is it only that particular, the annual, that annual report, is that the only one out of that contract that we're using?
I don't know. Once the board authorizes this, then we take the action to implement the contract. So I don't know.
If anyone
What I
has
missed.
their,
I have them here, I'm trying
I
to
have them
find
here,
it for you.
yeah.
so I'm pretty sure it was the CBIZ. It had,
CBIZ, these are the fixed asset reporting.
yes,
This
there
here?
was like a couple of, yes. Right, yeah, just keep going. Yes, it is right here. So here, it's saying update service options, and then you have to, it looks like you have to almost initial, so I'm seeing the $12.75 for electronic annual update service. Is that?
That's the
And-
only service that we're going to be
That's what
purchasing.
okay. In regards to the Omni Group, this is insurance for a data breach.
Omni Group, I believe, is our 403B provider,
Right, they manage 403B employee contribution accounts.
Oh,
the retirement.
okay.
Yep.
All right, so then my question does not apply. Orthopedic Associates, is that the same rate as our previous contract?
Yes, it is. It's been
Okay.
that fixed rate for a number of years now.
And the contract lays out the terms, but then at the very end of the contract, it says it will be customized by the AD. So that seemed a little contradictory to me.
But this is the contract, so.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
the same contract that
You
we've
see
operated
how-
under.
If you kind of just glance through it, maybe you can, it's, you know, basically this says, we do this, we'll do this, we'll do this, you know, this is a part of it, this is a part of it, and then at the very end, it says, program will be customized as needed.
I
So-
believe that just gives the athletic director the authority to
Right,
kind of
which days, which
prioritize
times,
the
things like that.
services that are going to be provided,
So it outlines all of the services that can, and then at the end, it's tailored.
Right, it says which days and times the ATC will be on campus determined by the athletic director, and the ATC follows acceptance of this proposal.
Okay.
Based on the, schedules of sports and stuff.
Right.
Right, she can kind of decide where to prioritize the services at any given time.
And for the last three, just wanted to know if they were the same rates from the prior years.
The PT services there's a contractual increase built into that. So that should be an increase from the previous year, but it's according to the bid document. Alarm monitoring and maintenance, I would have to look at the specifics, but if there is any increase in the rate, it's due to specific language in the bid, which
Existing.
would have allowed for CPI increases.
Okay. Yep. Any other discussion? John, you okay? Yes, no, I'm shaking my head. Okay. Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion is carried. Number 13, the SRO contract. Resolve that the Board of Education, upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, approves the contract between the Marlborough Central School District and the Marlborough Police Department for the service of school resource officers as presented. Can I get a motion to approve? Frank, second. Joanne? Any discussion?
Hey, Mike, you sent an email out earlier today that I didn't get a chance to read. You want to elaborate on what
Yeah,
what
there was some-
advantages you just added?
Correct. We built in more flexibility into the contract. The way that the contract was starting to unfold, and the one we originally presented to the board had some language in there that I think that the two attorneys, when they were really crafting it, thought it was going to be beneficial for both sides because it finally defined exactly how many hours, how much money, et cetera. But what it didn't allow for is flexibility in schedule of time, allow flexibility in, listen, we have a snow day today, we don't need services, or we want to move the hours a little earlier or a little later. So the revision allows that kind of flexibility. It allows us to be much more flexible. So we have the police services in collaboration with the chief of police when we need those services. And the limit is our budget, so, as opposed to the contract, so.
And if I'm reading this right, it sounds like it's all between you and the chief of police or whoever on the police to figure out what you want and how you want it.
Correct.
how
And
it's
I'll be
scheduled.
collaborating with our administrative staff and our principals on when we're going to need it. And basically, we're going to have services from the start of school to the end of the school, and the principals will work out where they're going to be located at any given time. You know, maybe there's something going on that we need some traffic work in an area, or maybe there's something going on where we want to keep some surveillance on something, or, Yeah, there's a lot of flexibility built into it now as opposed to rigidity.
Any further discussion?
And this will, if we're approved tonight, it will be approved by the town board on Monday night and will be in shape for the start of school year.
Right. And it is a one-year agreement.
All in favor of the SRO contract? Say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Say no. So the motion is carried. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. Moving right along. Health and welfare. Seems appropriate. Resolved that the Board of Education, upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, sets the rate for health and welfare for the 2016-17 school year at the rate of $1,083.02 per pupil. Can I get a motion to set the rate? Russell, Frank, second. Any discussion?
I just want to say it's amazing, Pat, that you're able to get this done this early after the school year, when we get billed by other school districts 2 and 3 years afterwards because they don't set their rate.
Right.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion is carried. Number 15, equipment and book disposition. Resolved that the Board of Education, upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, acknowledge and authorize the equipment and book lists be disposed of, sold, donated, recycled, or thrown away as presented. Can I get a motion to authorize this? Russell, second. Joanne, any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion is carried. Number 16, district and building safety plans. Resolved that the Board of Education, upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, review and approve the following emergency response safety plans for 2017-18 school year for the Marlborough Central School District as presented. Can I get a motion to review and approve? Second, I'm sorry, first Joanne, second Frank. I see in the corner of my eye. Any discussion?
Yeah, these are new updated plans that are in line with the requirement of New York State Education Department and also the state police. Those will be submitted soon. We also have updated our training regimen and our signage and our approach as far as how we work at the building level with our safety teams. So I'm very encouraged by the work that happened to put that together. The documents, the training elements, the videos, the materials that are needed are right there on our website for our people to use whenever they need it. So if they need refreshers throughout the year, if they need understandings of why, the private elements of our safety plans will never be publicly available. So we certainly don't want to show all of our cards when we're trying to keep our children safe, but there certainly are elements that are there that also give our families, our staff, and our students a sense of comfort when they see that there's an awful lot that goes into safety planning. So I encourage you to take a look at the safety, I'm sorry? I encourage you to take a look at our, I'm sorry.
Did you have something you want to add? No.
I encourage you to take a look at our safety website and really look at what we're doing for student, staff, and people safety.
Joanne, did you have a comment?
I says they've worked very hard on this, and it's, everything that I read is very good on it. I'm definitely impressed.
Except I did see the middle school plan, it said that there are no pool facilities, but then I think on the next line, it said the pool was located on the first floor, number 29, room 29.
Oh, did it? I think we'll need to work on that one, Mike. We'll take a look at that.
All right, any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion is carried. Moving on to number 17, voting for the Area 9 Director of NISBA. Resolved that the Board of Education, upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, approve the vote for Karen Osterhout to be elected as the Area 9 Director of NISBA.
Now, I only put that forward because that's the only letter I got, but Ms. Reed, made a note of someone tonight, so it's certainly, this is 100% the board's pleasure.
I believe the last meeting, we had also talked about John, because they did ask us about that at the last meeting, and we said yes to doing John.
I don't think we voted on it, though, so,
No,
but it's certainly the board's pleasure to decide how you want to approach it tonight.
that or we can
So-
table it until the next meeting.
You want to table it or amend it?
I think we did vote on,
I would like to
Did we
amend
vote
it,
on
I think we
John.
did vote on that last meeting.
Did we vote on that, Pat?
I believe so.
Yes.
All right, so why don't we table that, and then we'll make
Yeah,
a,
we did-
It
we
was a
did vote-
resolution?
We did vote on it last time.
all right,
Do you remember that?
think so?
That was a long meeting.
We'll table, I'll ask if you could table it then, and we'll check the minutes and get that squared away.
Okay, can I get a motion to table the vote for Area 9 Director?
Motion.
Second, first, John, second, Joanne? Any discussion?
This is for John.
All in favor?
Yes.
Any opposed? The motion to table is carried.
I did, yeah, until we looked into it, I believe we did
We'll check it out.
for John.
Moving on to number 18, tax resolution. Resolved that the Board of Education, upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, approves the 2017-2018 tax resolution as presented. Can I get a motion to approve tax resolution? Frank, second? Second, Joanne? Discussion?
Pat's got some color commentary, if he could, to just give a sense of where we are with things. He handed out a document, so maybe, Pat, you could update the board on that?
Sure. So, overall, we saw some growth in Marlboro and Newburgh. Marlboro saw about a 0.5% growth in true value, or about $3.7 million in growth. Newburgh saw 4.5% growth, or a little bit over $22 million in true value. The majority of that, about 21.99 million of that, was due to a change in the equalization rate from 36% to 34.4%. And Plattekill, we saw a slight loss of value of about 1.2 million, or about 2.87% in value of the Plattekill properties. Plattekill and Marlboro are both assessed at 100%, so that means whatever their taxable assessed value is would be an expected actual market sale price value. But overall, we had some really good news. The tax rate for Marlboro and Plattekill actually went down 2.73%. And the tax rate for Newburgh went up 1.68%. So we initially, when we talked in the spring, looking at last year's valuations of the municipalities and equalization rates, we were expecting to see a 2.71% increase in the rates. So due to the growth in real terms and also through the change in the equalization rate, we do see Marlboro and Plattekill with a reduction in the tax rate. So we're now on the third year of a reduction in our tax levy, but this is the first time that reduction in the levy has actually done what it should do, which is result in a reduction in the tax rates. So the information that I passed out to you was to take a look at $100,000, $200,000, and $300,000 sale price homes in Marlboro and Plattekill, and then also broken out for Newburgh. So you can see really, except for a $100,000 home with an enhanced star in Newburgh, everybody, if their taxable assessed value on their property remains constant, they should see a reduction in their tax bill going in for the 17-18 school year. Now, if your assessment increases, then there's some variability there. It may or may not result in a decrease, but we have no control over what the assessed value of the actual properties are. But if it's held constant, this year, you should see both, and Newburgh, even though you see the 1.68% in the increase in the rate, because the growth in overall taxable assessed value or real value of Newburgh expanded greater than the growth in the tax rate. So even though you see a growth in the tax rate, we're still expecting to see a reduction in the actual tax bills, holding constant the taxable assessed value of the individual property. So if your house remains the same value as it was last year to this year, no matter where you are in the district, you should see a reduction in the taxes that you have to pay. That's the first time it's happened since I've been here. That's really, you know.
You should
I
say
think-
that again and really speak into your microphone.
I think that's the first time it's happened since I've been here. And it's what it should be. I mean, we're on the third year of a reduction in our levy. In theory, that reduction in a levy would result in a reduction in tax rates and the overall tax bill. And this is the first year where that's actually occurring. And there's a number of factors. You have the growth in the individual municipalities, but you also, you know, we absorbed all the large drops in value of the roasting facility, and that's now starting to really, it's still dropping significantly in value, but nowhere near the large increments that it has done for the past couple of years. So really, everybody should be very pleased with this information, because although we projected in the spring an increase in the rates, we're seeing a decrease for Marlborough and Plattekill, an increase of less than what we projected for Newburgh, but the net effect being everybody should pay less on their tax bills as long as their taxable assessed value remains constant. You know how I like to put those qualifiers in, but that's all we can do.
Right.
So it's really pretty good news, I think.
Good
It's
news.
disappointing that Mr. Reynolds isn't here today.
So
I'll
Pat,
make sure I email this to him. so
We'll
he's
have that
aware.
communication.
Yes.
So Pat, how does this, how does this differentiate between the impacts, the continual impacts of the plant reducing in value? Or is it rolled up in the Newburgh numbers here?
It's rolled up in the Newburgh numbers at this point. We used to separate the plant out as a large parcel, but last year, remember we had the discussion, we were expecting to see that significant rise in tax rates when Roaston dropped too low in value to still be considered a large parcel. Last year it happened before we expected it to happen, and the net effect was just, you know, last year I think we had a 0.66% increase in the tax rates for Marlborough and Plattekill and 0.97 for Newburgh. So the growth in those municipalities offset the impact of the loss of that large parcel designation.
Okay, so your numbers presented at the budget hearings are actually going to be improved overall in terms of the estimated impact for those who would not see a change in assessed value.
Well, right, so what we do at the budget hearings are we estimate what these numbers are right now.
Right.
So these real numbers came in much better than what we estimated in the spring. Now, come spring, I'll be making an estimation for this time, 2018.
Right.
So these numbers don't really impact what we're going to do for the budget presentation next year.
Right.
Because that's still unknown at this time. what
Right.
that's gonna
So
look
you're in the process of setting the bills to go out based on this new information?
like. Correct.
Okay. How about as far as state aid? At the time you estimated state aid based on what they gave you, and then I think there's some time goes by after that point in time, after the vote, where the legislator actually votes for what the total final numbers are. Is that actually true the way that happens, or did the numbers you estimate at that
The
time
numbers
hold
we
still?
estimate are pretty solid.
They're solid, okay.
Yeah, there may be small changes, but nothing of any significance.
Okay.
You know, we might be, they might make some changes at some point that result in a couple $1,000 difference, but, over $16, $17 million in aid.
So based on the assumptions you've made, people will see a real net reduction in their tax bill this year, potentially, as opposed to in the past. where-
Provided their taxable assessed
Right.
value remains constant.
Right, as
If you added an addition to your house and your taxable assessed value increased, or if you were reassessed or whatever may be to change that. But again, those, all we can do is say, if your value of your property is constant from last year to this year, you should pay less taxes this year than you did last year,
Okay.
by the numbers on the sheet that I gave you.
Yeah, definitely good news, because the confusing part was always for people that we would show sometimes similar numbers, but the offset of the plants would bump it the other direction in terms of your total
No,
bill.
usually by the time we
The
get to
best way to
this
think
point-
about it too, though, is this is a generality.
Yeah.
Everybody's situation is very
Right,
specific and very different and very,
Right, but even based on the assumptions, we
Well,
always had
by the
that.
time we get to this point where we're actually setting the rates and the levy, all of the impacts of the power plant, everything is
Okay,
here.
that's the
What happens
difference.
in the spring, when we give the estimation of what these numbers are gonna look like, that's where we still can have some fluctuation based on the overall values
Yeah.
of the municipalities, the equalization rates, things of that nature.
Yeah, I think the key point here for those who've been following it for years is that you finally hit that inflection point where the impacts of the plan
When I show
is
you the
rolled up.
chart in the spring of the tax rates, you will see Marlboro and Plattekill go down, where they've constantly, now they've gone up and they've really flattened off the last couple of years. You know, there were two big jumps and then really kind of flattened out. Now you will see a decrease in that tax rate.
for the last
for
couple of years,
Marlboro
we
and
try to do the 5-year financial report mid-year in that December, January timeframe, probably January timeframe. That kind of gives a picture that sets the stage for our budget process.
Correct.
And it looks at all of these elements as we project out. But when we get to August, the real numbers. Now we know the real numbers, because
Correct.
that's when the equalization rates are in, et cetera.
Well, and the other big problem with this whole process is the state and their timetables. You know, when we're doing that first part and that planning the budget, a lot of times the state doesn't have their budget, or we get it at the absolute last minute. The fact that they're allowed to not set their rates until now, I mean, this is not unusual that we don't get it till the end of August, and, you know, that we're all doing guesswork. It's because they're setting rates, it works fine for all the January 1 budgets, because the rates are set, and they've got all those months, but because we're on a totally different cycle than the rest of the state, the schools are all off kilter, and every school district deals with this craziness of having to guess so much through the way, so that at the end, you're giving something at the last minute because of the state system, something totally outside all of our control.
Yeah, we just got the numbers from the counties within the last week, 7 to 10 days of what the final, here's your taxable assessed value. And then we go to work, start calculating everything out.
Any further discussion? All in favor of the tax resolution as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion is carried. Number 19, old business. No old
Did,
business.
Mr. Milazzo had raised at one point the issue, I think we talked about publicly, right, with the tax map, with the discrepancy. And I know I'd answered Frank individually, but, you know, just for everybody's information, we did clarify that those properties that were in question were in the Wallkill School District. For some reason, the general map that appears when you go on the county's website has a boundary. We don't know where that boundary comes from, but there is a way to drill down when you look at the individual property to the actual PDFs of the tax maps that the assessors use, and those have, although she pointed out, you know, those are the accurate boundaries, but she said, oh, except for this one, which is backwards, you know. So, but that is, you know, we did see and verify that those parcels in question were in Wallkill. We now understand what maps to look at, and we could advise anybody who calls with questions exactly what to look at in order to determine where their property falls.
And hopefully the county will actually fix their website.
Yes.
Any other old business? Joanne, did you say you had something?
No, that's right.
Any new business? I'd actually like to bring something up to the board. I would like to take a look at our acceptable use policy, section 7314, 7315, 7316. I'm not quite sure. I couldn't even find 7316, I think, off the top of my head. Anyway, I'd like to have discussion regarding cell phones in our classrooms. I've had a lot of discussion with teachers, parents, students, and I've also done quite a bit of reading on the research that is available on the impact of such technology of cell phones in the classroom and the impact that it has on the ability to stay focused. I actually read a Microsoft study, which was very interesting. It included 2,000 participants, and in it, it was revealed via EEG, brainwaves, that the brain's attention span has actually fallen from 12 seconds to 8 seconds, which is less than the attention span of a goldfish, which, if you envision a goldfish in a tank, I think it's pretty interesting. So if student achievement is our goal, how can we dismiss the impact of personal cell phones? Specifically, I'm talking about students being able to have them in the classroom where at any given point in time they can text, which can cause significant distraction, which often is a source of fighting or bullying. And I would like to suggest, like I have in the past, that you do your own research so we can have further discussion as a board, because I feel that just a simple drop box in the classroom, I know that in the middle school you're not supposed to have cell phones out at all, but in the high school, you know, just thinking about student achievement, and if cell phones and texting, naturally, kids are texting, whether the guest Wi-Fi is on or not, they have their parents' data that they can use, that this is causing quite a distraction. I've also read that other schools that have incorporated the very simple drop box, it's like these little tiny lockers, not lockers, but just, you know, a box with cubes, thanks. That those schools have actually seen an increase in scores as much as in exams, as much as 6%. So I would welcome discussion about it. I know that there is plenty controversy over banning cell phones in school. That's not something that I'm looking to do. I'm just simply saying, allow there to be a drop box in each classroom. When a student goes in, they drop their phone in for that period, and then we don't have this problem that, I mean, we just invested in an additional SRO, and I think that we're all pretty aware and pretty savvy of, you know, what can happen when kids are texting throughout the day with bullying and fighting and drama with boyfriend, girlfriend. I mean, it's all a distraction.
Could we put together a presentation for the board to consider on this topic in collaboration with our high school, middle school principal, Robin and Mike, so that we have a thoughtful discussion
Absolutely.
on what the policies are, what the practicality is, what are some limits in place already, so we can give you folks a bird's eye view of exactly what our view of things are and
Sure.
certainly how we might be able to improve that. We'll try to pull something together for the 7th. That might be a bit ambitious, so it would probably be the 28th of
Okay.
September. But
Mike, I would definitely like that, because I don't know enough about the current policy, and I'm sure there's logic behind allowing it. One thing to consider in the presentation is what is the impact now with that everyone will have a Chromebook? Does it lessen the need of a cell phone? Yeah.
very good point.
I mean, it's not there yet, right? But
Well, I mean, from my perspective, I certainly understand the importance of technology in the classroom. That's not my point. My point is what you can do on your private cell phone when you're in class. It doesn't even matter if a teacher says, no cell phones allowed. Kids put them in their laps and they're texting. I mean, we should all be very realistic, you know, about that. And I think it's just to advocate really for the ability to maximize learning time. I mean, if we have, you know, an attention span of 8 seconds just normally. I mean, that's pretty crazy, just to think of all of those additional things that you're putting on
We can
a
pull
student.
some good information together for you so you can get some hands-on perspectives on it.
I have to tell you, I do like the idea what Sue just said, putting the cell phones in the beginning of each class and seeing that, because not only that, the kids are videotaping and you're seeing it up on YouTube, you're seeing it on Facebook, on Instagram, and they're not always positive, especially when they're, you know, bullying somebody. So, you know what? The classroom should be a safe place for the kids also to learn.
Yep, there's no disagreement from this chair. I also want to make sure we understand the you know, what we actually allow, what we do.
Right.
That does not mean that there aren't better mousetraps out there or worse mousetraps out there. You know, people can always get, I mean, does everybody do 55 down 9W?
No, but I
So
guarantee you,
that's-
every other person that you look at is on their cell phone while they're
Well,
driving.
that's a whole nother issue. So, yeah, we need to
Which
have
causes
a
a huge distraction
Yes,
and is
yeah,
illegal.
yeah. So we need to have a real good 360 look at this, and certainly the Chromebook initiative absolutely has an element of this, so.
Yeah, if we
I
just
look forward to it.
ask council also, because I like the idea of the box, just to make sure maybe we gotta incorporate something into policy, realizing that if you bring it to school, you're gonna have to do this, and oh, by the way, we're not responsible if it goes missing.
Right, right. So, yeah, we'll look
Just to
at,
cover us in both ways.
we'll be very open and thoughtful on this process, so. Potentially for the 7th, but knowing what's gonna be happening over the next week and a half,
Yeah.
it's more likely the 28th.
That's more realistic.
Yeah.
Any other new business? Other items. We're looking at taking an evening, hopefully, to examine our internal operations and efficiencies with a board retreat. Do any of you have any dates or times? Well, I know that we need to discuss this in executive session. I'm assuming, based on everyone's schedules, and if I'm assuming wrong, let me know, that a night or evening retreat would be the best.
Well, if that's the board's choice, I don't know that we would have that budget for right now, but really,
I'm sure we would make the paper.
what Susan and I talked about was the potential for having a retreat so we can talk about board operations and board efficiencies. So, you know, we've got some opportunities here to take a look at how we operate as a group. What is our long-term vision? Do we all have that shared vision? That's certainly part of goal setting, and we need to spend that time in a public forum. But in a private forum, in a executive session mode, we can talk about board operations and board efficiencies because we get into a lot of detailed legal matters and certainly personnel matters. So it's a legitimate reason. What I would just need in order to set that up with Susan is a date and a time, because then we can see if we can get a facilitator in to help us with that process.
So does anyone have a particular evening that's better for them as far as days go?
For me, it would be a Friday night because I don't have the boys Friday nights.
Well,
I know
before you,
that's hard on everybody else, but
before I could answer that, I have to have some kind of parameters of what you're thinking. Is it 2-3 hours? Is it a 4-hour session? Is it a couple 1-hour sessions multiple times? Like, we need to talk a little bit about that to deal with logistics, because, I mean,
The answer to that is yes.
so,
Yeah.
There's no, it's really what the board's pleasure is.
right. I mean, certain weeknights are probably the best rather than weekends, but I could probably be flexible in either, depending on, again, how long we think we want to do a single session, or if we want to do multiple sessions. And I imagine we don't want to tie it around a night that we're doing a board meeting, right? It's not,
No, we wouldn't be able to do that.
No, if we were gonna do
Unless we
something
did it in
like that with
between.
a facilitator, it'd probably be like a 6 o'clock to 10 o'clock window on an evening that's not a board night. Keep in mind, we have to, if we're going to do this, we have to have a facilitator come in, and we will have to tell that facilitator what the focus is. So that's another element that this
we
group
got some
has to
homework to do.
decide on, what it is we want to accomplish in that session.
well, I'm all for it, and it sounds like we need to do some conversation about prep and what we want to do, setting some parameters and
Right.
Does
That,
Before we
anyone have-
actually
pamphlet kind of
set
is
the
a,
date.
there's a pamphlet I had emailed out,
Yep.
it's kind of an idea starter,
I
but
thought
it's not
you did.
everything.
Right, right.
It's totally customized based on our needs, so.
Does anyone have any thoughts in regards to,
Regards to what? Which question we had? We opened a couple.
well, let's go back to the day. How about since we're used to being out on a Thursday night, how about a Thursday night in between? Or
That
let me-
works, that
let-
works good for me.
Good as any for me, yeah. I mean, only thing
Is
that would stop me
anyone
is work travel that I don't know in advance, but that's, can give any given day of any week, so Thursday works for me.
And how about Friday? Forgive me, Joanne, I was
That's
not
fine.
disregarding you.
That's fine. I'll
Or
make
Friday,
it
I
work
guess.
no
Friday
matter what
could
we
work.
have to do. I always do.
Knowing what September looks like too, we're probably looking at the first available Thursday being the
Board meeting.
second Thursday of October. And here's why I'm saying that. In order to get someone
Right.
scheduled, the second Thursday of September is too soon. The third Thursday of September is Rosh Hashanah. The fourth is our meeting. The 1st of October is our meeting. You know, so
And
we're
the
probably
2nd of
looking at early
I won't be
October.
here.
Right,
I'll be at conference.
right.
Which
So-
I don't, honestly, I want to try to get it in September, because if there are things that we are going to be getting out of that we are going to be implementing as a board, otherwise, there's really no purpose of having it. So, okay, let's go back to, the only concern that I have about Friday is getting a speaker to come on a Friday night. I don't know how.
It's gonna be challenging.
So it's fine. I'll make it, I always make it work. So just if they want to do Thursday night's fine.
Well, I don't think Thursday at this point for September is working, so how about a Wednesday night? What are we looking at?
As long as it's not the first Wednesday of the month,
Okay.
that's Orange Ulster School Board.
Well, Wednesday, the 20th is the night before Rosh Hashanah. Other than that, the Wednesdays are open. I mean,
How
I
about the
think
27th?
27th might be the
best?
best shot at getting a presenter.
If we can't get them there, then like the 12th, which would be the Thursday,
I won't be here.
but you're gonna be at the
I'll
conference.
be up in the plaza.
Yep, and then I'm gone the next week.
Where are you going?
I'll be in Philly. I'll be here for the meeting on the 19th, but I leave on Friday morning. The 4th, I mean,
Why don't I do this? Why don't I reach out to NISBA? Why don't I reach out to NISBA
Yes.
and see what their process is for helping to determine dates and see if they have like windows. They might say, you know what, listen, you don't have anything till November.
Yeah, I think that's
You know
probably
what
the
I mean?
best bet.
The other thing
Let
is
me
how
do
about-
that.
And how about a Tuesday if we can't do Wednesday night, how about a Tuesday or Wednesday night?
They
That
might
leaves
give
you
me
both.
like 4 or 5 dates to choose from.
Yeah.
That we can then help kind of
I think that's
solidify the
best.
conversation.
Yeah,
okay?
I think that's best.
All right.
Because at this point, we could say it, and they're not even available.
That's a good idea. I think that's the best approach.
Okay.
Okay, so also too, we have 2017-18 board goals that we need to develop.
Right, and I think that's also part of a broader discussion that we want to enter into, at least I would appreciate for some longer-term direction. You know, we've really done some stabilizing in a lot of areas. Certainly, as we talked about tonight, financially, we've stabilized quite well. And academically, we will be presenting the Board of Education with some information as the months unfold, when the state releases things for us to be comparative. But knowing what we already know, we know we have made some nice gains. Not necessarily year-to-year gains, but when we look at the leveling element of tide changes, and we compare ourselves to other entities, other school districts, we're starting to see ourselves move up in the world, which is fantastic, consistently. So I would benefit, in order to continue marching forward, what's our goal in the long term? I'm not talking about for October, or November. I'm talking about where do we want to be in 5 years? And do we all have a shared collective vision of what that is? Because we may think we do, but have we verbalized it? Have we had that discussion of where does Marlboro want to be as an educational entity in 5 years, in 10 years? I gave you a publication tonight, set a 10-year board agenda. So there's some documents to take a look at and read also. But this board absolutely successfully managed through some difficult times. We're not there anymore.
Right.
Now where do we want to go? And then we can start to figure out how do we get there?
Out of crisis mode and into planning.
Yeah.
Exactly, and
Yeah.
strategic planning.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm not talking about too wide,
Right.
you know, but big picture too. You know, that 30,000-foot view of things. As you look down on Marlboro, where do we want to take this place?
In doing that, we need to include tactical as well, the 1 to 3 years as well.
Oh, absolutely.
Right, so I think you're right, everything you just said, I agree with.
Is that on?
No, I'm sorry. What I said is I agree with everything you just said. I just don't want us to lose sight of the fact that we also have to develop, I believe, quarterly, annually, and maybe 3-year increments as well into that, more on a tactical level, to get to the broader goals. Measurable results on how you're getting there, making adjustments along the way when things maybe aren't going the right direction, or investing more in certain things that are showing progress or showing a quicker response than expected, you know.
And I think that's absolutely something that we can react to once we know where we all want to get to. Once there's agreement that we know where we need to get to or want to get to, then we can develop those plans on how to get there and review those and measure them.
And I assume you're thinking we will do all that, and at least some of that in the retreat.
No, we have to do all of that in public session.
Okay,
Goal setting has to be in public session.
okay.
So,
Some of that, I assume, is a lot
so that
of
would
work,
mean carving out time in the meeting.
and as a little bit of a work session of how you get there. Like you said,
Correct.
With
Correct.
some prep work of all of us to come prepared.
Yes.
Correct.
Okay.
So that's where you folks have to do some thinking now about what does it mean? And it's individualized, it's very individual, but, you know, really thinking through, and we can certainly set it up on an agenda to be a discussion element where we start to propose goals or visions. Where, I mean, I can provide you, they're on our policy, that we have a philosophy statement. We do have some elements that are already out there that are statements about what we believe. What is our vision? Do we still believe that? Do we need to make adjustments there? Certainly these documents I gave you tonight might be conversation starters for your perspective. And that will absolutely help me as we start to implement things.
And also, too, setting traditional goals, like, for example, student achievement will improve, that's great, but we need to have progressive goals. How are we going to, we need to be specific, they need to be measurable, they need to be achievable.
Correct. I mean, here's an example. It's 8:45 right now. We just got to this kind of discussion at 8:45. So that means we spent roughly an hour on some routine matters. Is that how we want to spend our time? And that's something that as a board we can discuss in retreat. That's more of board operations and board processes and process on how we work as a board. Or is there something else we can do with our time here and be fed by presentations and information, but it's not something that we should be doing behind. We should be ahead of it.
Yes.
And I can be ahead of it if I know where you want us to get, and that would be that strategic planning element. And I'm planning for January now. I'm not planning for January, the last week of December.
Yeah, I think that, you know, for the most part, when we get to these discussions, that's when you really see the fruit of the labor, so to speak, and what our ideas are, and how our vision and mission, I guess, come together. So, I mean, of course, you know, the work has to get done, going through the agenda. That is important and has to get done. But so often we do labor for such a long period of time, and when we get to this time where we could have great discussion, everybody's kind of worn out or, you know, in another frame of mind.
So how about we do this? We take an action to review the current goals, and each of us prepare for a discussion on, as Mike described, and in some of these documents, where we want to be in 5 to 10 years. And we'll pick a night, one of the meetings, hopefully in the next couple, where we carve out that time.
We can put it on the agenda for the 7th, just as at that point, it'll be old business,
Yes.
right? Teresa, can you make sure that's on the agenda, old business for the board goals for 17-18? Okay.
Yeah, and one thing, and I know we're gonna not really talk about that until we really get together and we talk about the operations and how we function, but one of the things I think this doesn't lend itself to, our regular portion of the meeting, is that kind of discussion.
Correct.
Because the reality of it is, I think for us to be productive in that conversation, it's important that the public's here, it's important that they hear what's going on, but that discussion really should be at 4 square tables or an oval table in front, so we're all conversing amongst us, rather than trying to, up and down a long aisle. For that, specifically for that kind of engagement, to really have a good discussion. It's open to the public, everybody's here.
Correct.
But it's a different, let's do our regular stuff and then move into that, but we need a different setting to do that.
That's
This
truly
is-
what a work session is.
Right.
A true work session is that, where there might be some agenda items that need action, but the bulk of the action items get put to the regular meeting. And certainly that's part of the operations discussion
Right.
that we can have.
So
I
maybe,
do miss- that's right. I was gonna say, I do miss when we're sitting down in the front where we can actually see each other, like Frank said, and talk to each other, because it makes it a little better.
well,
And
maybe,
you can actually see the person, and it just, to me, it's more of a board meeting than we're sitting here doing this, or,
maybe for the workshop, we can do the workshop perhaps at one of the schools and have more of a round table discussion, if you will. And then the actual board meeting.
Well, we can bring the tables back the way we used to bring them and make this a
Well,
horseshoe.
It would be up in the boardroom.
We can do it up, it's a public meeting unless there's the only problem with doing it upstairs and let's be real, we changed this room to make it work. There's normally, those tables are together, it was just chairs around that. We could do that here and
Right.
still have, because you lose something, although you can tape it and stuff, it's not the same when we do it someplace else.
So are you suggesting we do a separate session than our regular Tuesday or twice a month?
No.
No, there's two,
Okay,
see it
come-
on the agenda, one's called the work session, one's called the regular
Right,
meeting.
right.
What Frank's talking about is the work session is
Okay.
a meeting that's designed to address the issues that we have deemed as a board for the year
Okay.
as the items.
So
That's
we-
part
so
of that
we-
visioning.
So we set ourselves up for the work session as you described. We take care of public business
Right.
or the regular day-to-day business first, and then we go into that section,
Well,
but we're already
actually,
set
we
up.
try to minimize the board actions unless there's
Yeah.
something that is absolutely timely that we need you to act on.
Right, right.
You try to push all of
Okay.
it to the regular
I think
meeting.
that's key.
And we're prepared for the work session as a group.
Yeah.
Because administratively, we know where we need to be.
That makes the most
And we've pulled together the
Yeah.
data, the information, the presentation, the materials, the professionals,
right.
the experts, so that you have the people to have your discussion on what it is you want to discuss. But that's part of that visioning element.
Right.
That's not difficult to put together once we know what you folks want us to do.
And if we have that new system by the 7th, the public can pull it all down ahead of time.
Well, yeah, yeah, but.
Perfect timing.
Absolutely, right,
7th sounds like it,
right. The 7th is,
or not the first, but what's the first in October, the first meeting in October?
I think it's the
Oh,
second.
you want to do it in September?
Regardless,
Okay.
we're gonna start the
Pick your date.
conversation, and whether we move to that format hasn't been decided. That's something
No,
that we have to decide. I mean,
Okay.
those are options.
And also too, executive session, there's,
Well, that's another thing I raised to Susan. I said, one of the reasons why we have meeting times at 7:30, certainly we've got a commuter with Bill and with Russell, and I don't know if Russell has any flexibility in his time.
Lots of flexibility. You can go earlier if you want.
Well, something I posed to Susan was that we could potentially have executive session at 6 or 6:30 and the meeting at 7 or 7:30. But that has to come from you folks. Again, that can be part of the operations discussion for efficiencies. So,
I liked,
The only thing we gotta remember with that is, that's good, but we, in fairness to the public, that means we are done with executive session when the meeting's supposed to start.
Right, and if there's something that's extraordinarily pressing that we need to go back into executive session after, we can.
None of us would be unhappy with getting home before midnight.
Well, you know, and I think this is part of what we need to talk about as a group for our own efficiencies. You know, there are certainly some things that you can push upon me to create better efficiencies in our agenda development and how we're going to push through these things. I certainly want to work with that for you. So whatever you want, I can do.
I know for me, just for example, the district and building safety plans, I mean, that was like 264 pages to read, and then, I know for everybody, but I'm saying, you know, then to transition yourself to something else and then something else, to have executive session first, it would allow me, and I've discussed this with Mr. Brooks, it would allow me personally to just, you know, get my mind in the right place, because so often when you're coming out of life and coming into this, when you're not doing it every day, to, you know, transfer all of your thoughts and pour them in and give your heart and really into this job and what it takes, you have to kind of be in the mindset, and executive session a lot of times lends, you know, the ideas and the thoughts to start flowing, and then you can come out and be in more of a better frame of mind and speak to the issues and discussion.
You raise a very good point, too, and this is a discussion I have with our administrative group all the time. Consider also our role here, and certainly I'm very appreciative when the materials we put together, you folks spend a lot of time culling through and reading, but that's certainly not the expectation in your role, that you fine-tune every single piece of verbiage in there. That's what you've put to us. Really what you put to us is, you folks need to develop a plan, a contract, a program, and you set the parameters for that and be the guardrail. And that's the thing that I've talked to, especially my central folks, a lot about. None of us teaches a lesson, but we set expectations, we monitor, we are the guardrail, and we start to see a car go off the road a little bit, we need to make sure that that car goes back on the road. But we can't drive every car. You know, there's literally 40 classrooms in the high school, times 9 periods, 450 classes in a day. I mean, summer study halls and lunch and things like that, but still, there's a lot of moving parts. So for us to pretend that we're controlling each one of those cars, we're fooling ourselves.
Well, and it's
But
not
we
so much.
absolutely need to be, I'm talking about administratively,
Yeah.
we absolutely need to be those guardrails. So, you know, that,
And for us, it's not so much as to be, you know, the controlling factor of such. It's to be informed.
correct, right, and there's that balance with time, yeah. So, anything the board wants to do, we are prepared to deliver.
Well, I think we definitely have some good food for thought. Good?
I have one more.
I'm sorry?
I have one more item.
Oh, go ahead.
Before we forget, because we will not be in school until the 6th of September, correct?
Yes.
Wednesday the 6th, correct.
The first football game is September 1st at 7 o'clock at the high school. That's our first game, correct? So I just wanted to make sure I gave a shout out and wish the boys good luck, even though I know, I'm not going to jinx it, never mind. I want to wish them good luck. Go
Thank
Dukes.
you.
That's it.
Yes, go Dukes. Okay, moving on to 22. I think it's 5 to 9. Recognition of district residents and others. Okay, and moving on, we do have a proposed executive session pending our current legal and proposed acquisition, sale, or lease of real property and employment history of particular persons. Can I get a motion for us to go into executive session. Joanne, Frank second, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, resolved that the Board of Education adjourn the meeting at 8:59.
Actually, executive session, 8:59. We adjourn
Oh,
after executive.
Exec,
Yep.
yes.
Yep.